Greetings, dear viewers, and welcome to my fan commentary on the first two episodes of Power Rangers Zeo, Zeo Beginning Parts 1 and 2. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers went on for a very long time, and I felt that with Zeo, this was a fresh breath of air for us to finally do something that the show had been longing to do, because when we had the season 25 years ago, and yeah, 2021 is 25 years since 1996, and when we had these Power Rangers, it's been 25 years since Mighty Morphin Power Rangers had ended. And starting with the season, Power Rangers as a brand starting with Zeo, would start this annual tradition of switching out costumes, renaming the show along the way, changing the concept and status quo of the show with new villains and new powers, new Megazords, but Zeo is still a continuation of Mighty Morphin and is still part of the Zordon era. So it was nice for them to actually change the pace of the show, because MMPR, it was getting too much of a stalemate by the third season. But I still like season 3 Mighty Morphin. But the more I think about it, the show was running on fumes because, again, they did that movie. And, the third season, they had to do how they got the powers of the ninja differently than in the movie. And then Kimberly's departure, Catherine comes in, Master Vial is, unleashed and unveiled. The Zeo Crystal is set up. The Rangers get the metallic armor. The final time we'll see the Mighty Morphin suits on screen. The Equation Rangers would show up for the last 10 episodes. And what I like about this is that while the first episode of Zeo does give us a recap what happened at the end of the Alien Rangers story, but at least we're finally back to normal a bit. But things are gradually changed once they did restoring everybody back to their proper ages. But with Aisha gone, and Tanya is the newcomer of all of this, because, and though when they teleport out of the command center, she does have that yellow teleportation effect, knowing that Tanya replaced Aisha. But, part of me just wished that Aisha should have still stayed on as the Yellow Ranger for Zeo, but I guess, but knowing that her child actress, again, Karen Ashley didn't have a proper send-off as her proper character of Aisha. Just only the child actress had to give the character a send-off. They will repeat that same command center explosion for Turbo's finale. Yeah, because, Mighty Morphin, when it started, it was trying to find its footing. It took up until 17 episodes following by Tommy's debut to finally give us, leeway for Power Rangers to find its identity. And then season 2, Lord Zed came in, the Thunder Zords, were a thing. Tommy becoming the White Ranger, switching the Green Ranger powers for the White Ranger. Rocky M and Aisha replace Jason, Zach, and Trini. Rita and Zed get married. Then season 3, Rito comes in. The Zords are destroyed. The original powers are destroyed. They get the new powers with the ninja powers and the ninja Zords by Ninjor, and so forth. Because I know that it's been over 145 or 155 episodes of MMPR. And here we are this far into Power Rangers, and looking how Rita and Zed and company are celebrating over the Power Rangers' destruction, because it took them 3 years and they succeeded at it. But what I like about this is that with this opening, that it sets up the new status quo, because this was going to be risky for Power Rangers to finally get away from Mighty Morphin. But Rita and Zed are still going to be around for the season, and knowing that the villains we've had since MMPR are part of Zordon's era, the Machine Empire as well. What I do mind about this opening of the season is that this is very different from, given that we're finally taking chances of adapting Sentai footage of a full Ranger team this time, because, Mighty Morphin spent their last 2 seasons only taking the action and Zord footage from Die Ranger and Kaku Ranger, mainly for the Zords and the monsters. And while the Mighty Morphin suits were mainly all original footage because there's no more footage from Zeo Ranger they could use. All of that rock rubble was a great set decoration, setting up the aftermath of what happened after the end of MMPR, and then seeing the Machine Empire's quadrifighters destroying Zed's palace, because it's time we have to get rid of some old stuff from MMPR. We get some leftover footage from Zeo Ranger, mostly from Finster's workshop of all of his claymates and stuff. And on to switching from footage from Cherokee Sentai O Ranger of the Machine Empire. This is a strong introduction for the Machine Empire and for them to set up the status quo, overriding Rita and Zed, because Rita and Zed already had their time defeating the Power Rangers and trying to after so long. The Machine Empire, to be honest, I always liked the fact that we needed to change pace with villains that are actually not human-based or so, but rather machine-like villains. It seemed like in the beginning of Zeo, the Machine Empire did had a strong introduction setting up what their purpose is of taking over the Earth. But I think when the Rangers got the Zeo powers, that the more that the Rangers get powerful over time, it seemed to like over time the Machine Empire have become the jokes that they become to be. Knowing that as much as I like the comedy of Zeo, but I've noticed that the Machine Empire had gotten pretty ridiculous as time went on. While the original command center set is destroyed, the Zeo Crystal still remains, which is a great plot convenience why the Zeo Crystal would never get destroyed, because that power is just too strong for it to be destroyed. I don't get the point, why do they still need all those boxes of junk that they had from the Moon Palace, when knowing what's the point in all of that? They can't carry all that luggage, so they have to let that stuff go. I always loved that Zeo Crystal prop because, one of the many things I wish I would own for Power Rangers as a collector is the Zeo Crystal prop, or make a custom prop of the Zeo Crystal. Y'all made a big mistake putting the crystal into the ground and knowing this is, and then when the platform starts bringing them down to the ground. Now, when we get to certain moments with the Rangers stuck to the ground and with the concrete about to sink them lower underground, you'll see what I mean about with the visual effect. I also want to point out that when I was about to bring up O Ranger, which is Zeo's Sentai counterpart, when I saw Cherokee Sentai O Ranger, personally, I wasn't really that fond of O Ranger because I grew up on Power Ranger Zeo first. But of course, when I started watching Super Sentai and the Super Sentai shows that Power Rangers adapted its footage from, and when I got to O Ranger, it was getting really, the show started off pretty dark. The Machine Empire paranoia. Well, for the first 8 or 9 episodes, O Ranger was a really dark series because, again, it was supposed to be the 20th anniversary of Super Sentai, but they decided to give that big number of the 20th to Car Ranger, which is Turbo's Sentai counterpart. But although 1995 was 20 years since the original Sentai of Go Ranger did air, kicking off Super Sentai, but O Ranger, they wanted to make the show serious, but then they ended up, by the time when the 8th episode of the Sentai happened, they were starting to make the show. Well, by the time when that Tokyo subway incident took place, that's why the rest of the majority of O-Ranger had to go all silly-nilly to tone down all that dark seriousness. But by the time 1996 rolled in, and when the show was about that Sentai was about to finish up, they would go back being dark and serious again to conclude the series, leading O-Ranger to be so abysmal. The effect of the Rangers going all the way down into that underground hole, again, the green screen effects stuff, given this was early Power Rangers, the visual effects stuff back then like this was not there yet. Give it a couple of seasons. I don't know how the heck did they make the effects of all of the rock boulders and stuff of the command center building itself. Unless this is like Zordon's power, his Eltarian powers to help rebuild the command center. It's the same basement they had for the command center back in the Alien Ranger story, but with the addition of broken rubble and empty boxes. I don't know how they made that effect, because for 25 years since I've seen this season, I never figured out how did they have the effect to take all those pieces of the command center and rebuilt that stuff. I think the effect with Rito and Goldar losing their memories for the first chunk of the season, the command center blew up. Maybe the effect of the explosion messed up but they can't possibly be like, they had already left the command center when they set the bomb for it to detonate, so they can't really possibly lose their memories, and then they run into Bulk and Skull. They should have never even left Rita and Zed when knowing that they've already succeeded. It was nice for Zeo to make Goldar and Rito foils to Bulk and Skull for the first half of the series up until Golden Homecoming. So that's why, well, it made sense for these two to actually be, since again we're done with Mighty Morphin. So with any of the villains from that era, we have to make them be doing whatever while the Rangers become Zeo and deal with King Mondo and the Machine Empire instead. It's already been a year at this point since Bulk and Skull had joined the police force, the junior police force, I mean. And so for that, they needed some set of wheels in order to take down some people, but they would do that. I mind them having a bike and a sidecar for, a form of transportation when on the streets. But most of the time, they would never even do anything besides do some, antics while riding around the thing. And the last time they will use that will be during Turbo in the Trouble by the Slice episode. The episode where, of course, the infamous episode of Turbo where the Rangers get baked into a giant pizza. And that was the last time Bulk and Skull will use that bike and sidecar. They still have to use the teal tint of the O-Ranger footage of the Quadra Fighters because Rita and Zed and their crew are still on the moon trying to escape from the Machine Empire so they can get the Serpentera. Even if it's only been a year since season 3, Zed still doesn't like Master Vile. Rita's his father. Maybe they should have went with Master Vile. I mean, they probably should still have his costume somewhere, right? You know, as much as I mind the command center basement, I wish they used this set a little more often because outside of being in the main set of the power chamber, maybe they could use this basement for something useful, but they were not going to. Yeah, they still got Master Vile, but you know, I kind of wish they could have gotten this, you know, when they did do the third season of Mighty Morphin, if only if Toei still had that Skull Tavern thing that was Master Vile's as a, you know, floating head ship they could have used for American footage instead of using Serpentera. But we'll get to some footage of US footage of Serpentera when we get to it, probably in the next episode. And it sucks that, you know, they could have gone to Master Vile because they're trying to get away from, you know, the Machine Empire, but it was never going to happen. And now, as back to the Rangers with the command center, power chamber. Okay, see, it seemed to like back 25 years ago when I was a kid when I saw this, it was going to take some time for me to get used to command center to power chamber, but it's still the same building, but it's just the interior for the base of operations that the Rangers had up until Turbo um, has a different name to it. You know, given, okay, about the visual effects again, given this was early 90s Power Rangers still, but this was 1996, and Zeo just started at this point, and the visual effects stuff we had back in the 90s up to this point, yeah, was not all that great, because everything was starting to be, like, revolutionized with CGI being used and everything, and you know, CGI in television, however, back in this time, was not all that great. So I'm not going to take into account act like visual effects back then are great because I don't want to, you know, have those rose tinted goggles mess with my nostalgia and acting like CGI back these days back then were better than the CGI we have in today's film and television, which is not true. Because 90s kid shows, yeah, the green slime when you go inside the thing. You know, 90s kid shows like Reboot and Beast Wars, you know, the CGI wasn't perfect, but they still had solid stories. I wonder how they made that effective of that green slime gateway entrance. And then Rocky being reluctant about it. Like, he's scared that that slime from the green aura will get all over his clothes, but and of course, you know, that door with the Power Ranger insignia, you know, this looks so much like a PC game that was out for the time back then, because given the CGI animation. I always loved the Zeo version of the Power Chamber set because, well, I do like the Turbo version of the Power Chamber too, but the Zeo one is way more technologically advanced than let's say, well, the Mighty Morphin Command Center, because I wish that if only if they did something like this back during Mighty Morphin, I could see that. But the Command Center set, given what it was back in MMPR, well, it was time. It was time that it was going to take some time for me to get used to the change of environment for the Rangers and the base of operations. After all, we've had the Command Center set for Mighty Morphin for 3 years. And I'm happy that they also downsized Zordon's tube for the power chamber set, so we can actually see Zordon's head way better, because you know, back in the Mighty Morphin days, Zordon's tube was very long, going, you know, being downwards all the way upwards to where it is if there was such a ceiling for the command center when we had it. Some of the control consoles for the power chamber still is intact, but been modified. Okay, so for part 2, this is where we finally get to see, the Rangers getting a briefing from Zordon about the new threat. There's just something about that power chamber set I always liked it from Zeo. Not that not that I don't like the turbo version. I liked how Turbo's version of the power chamber set looked with the colored tubes and stuff, because something about those tubes that I liked from Turbo's version of the set. There was just something about it, because they were being more, what I liked about the power chamber set, like I was saying back when I was talking about part 1 for the last 20 minutes, is that the power chamber set in, there's a bit comparisons with the set that the power chamber set in this season has a more grimmer, technologically, darker teal color to it, with some greens and blues tinting around the color hues of the set, while the turbo version of the power chamber is more brightly colored, while Zeo's power chamber has this grim grounded sense of all this grounded technological advancement, or whatever you mean by that, but with the way how they did that set. Oh yeah, I missed the part when Zordon actually informed the Rangers about the United Alliance of Evil, the first mention of them, because Rita and Zed, as we learn, come we get to the end of... Oh, here's US footage of Serpentera. Where was that during Mighty Morphin with Serpentera's costume? It pretty much took Saban 2 seasons of the show at this point, since season 2, to finally get Serpentera's costume, but it's only brief. They will use this footage of one of the drop ships sending the cogs down later on in Countdown to Destruction. Yeah, because when O-Ranger started, if you go to the beginning of the Sentai that Zeo is based on, the Machine Empire, known as the Machine Empire Paranoia in O-Ranger, they were more ruthless and threatening as opposed to their Power Ranger counterparts, especially in the beginning of the Sentai. I actually prefer the Machine Empire here as opposed to an O-Ranger, but although I wasn't really that fond of how they were in the Sentai, because I can't believe O-Ranger started off so dark, given that, yeah, they wanted to be more, that Sentai was going to be way more serious than Zoo Ranger and Die Ranger, or some of the pre-Zoo Ranger Sentais that we had. Because Super Sentai back in the early 90s was way rougher and edgier. Not that I don't like that or anything. There was some edge and roughness in Kaku Ranger as well, but it wasn't that subtle. But when you think about the Power Ranger era Sentai, Zoo Ranger, Die Ranger, Kaku Ranger, O-Ranger, they were pretty edgy and dark for their time. And when you watch those shows, they were pretty edgy, and yeah, but again, that was Japan. This is here in the States, where we do things different. And then this comedic antics with Bulk and Skull, even 4 years into the show at this point, they're still afraid of monsters. But once they see Goldar and Rito, yeah, this is the first time they've even encountered Goldar and Rito. Because of all the times that, back in the Mighty Morphin era, when Bulk and Skull were scared of Rita and Zed's monsters every few episodes, when the monsters would attack them on purpose or try to, and then the Rangers would go and save them. When Zordon brings up the United Alliance of Evil to Tommy and them, but this mention of the United Alliance of Evil would only be to them for a while. But when we get the Turbo, when we get our first major cast change, switching out all of everybody from Tommy's side of teams for Rangers of the era, they're not going to be around for Power Rangers in space to see the United Alliance of Evil fully formed. I mean, I can see if any of the Rangers from this era, from Mighty Morphin and Zeo, still were around for In Space. Well, Adam did had a cameo in Always a Chance, which, if you want to hear my commentary thoughts on that, go watch my Always a Chance commentary. But the point is, you're going to mention the United Alliance of Evil to Tommy and them, but they're not going to be around by the time space comes around and when the turbo powers are destroyed and when TJ and them already have those powers and going into space, getting the shuttle and then the Astro Mega ship. And once Divatox was dealt with, but though she was like, she defeated the Rangers undisputedly though. But then you had, of course, setting up Astronema and Andros, our Red Ranger for that season, and then Astronema, after Rita and the Machine Empire and Divatox would come Astronema. So Tommy and his team would not be around because they will be graduating next season, so they won't be around for the rest of Turbo. And then as time goes on, see things delve together with these developments. And it sucks because, TJ and them actually managed to, because, well, it makes sense because when Turbo happened, Power Rangers was on the brink of cancellation. And so that's why, with the fears of the cancellation and with the changes of the cast and stuff and the improvements of the stories, because given Turbo was a ratings bomb, that's one of the reasons why they had to do what they had to do, switching out Tommy's team for TJ's team. So Tommy and them won't be able to be around long once we were about to set up what was going to be the last season of the show, that being In Space. This subplot with Bulk and Skull and Goldar and Rito did work very well for the first half of the show. It was pretty much of a stroke of genius for the writers, because with these two, putting two and two together, two bumbling idiots together, this could work. Sad Serpentera will have an appearance way later down the line come Forever Red. This is the last time we're going to see Serpentera for a while. It's a really long while too, because last we checked, when Zordon Z-Wave took effect in Countdown to Destruction, everything associated with the United Alliance of Evil should be wiped out, but not Serpentera, because Zordon's wave didn't even wipe out Serpentera or any of the following villains left over that the wave did not affect, like Scorpina and Gasket and Archerina when we get to them. That table just came out of nowhere. I mean, it wasn't there earlier in the beginning of this episode, and so it's there now. So it makes sense for Billy to step down from being a ranger because, ever since we had the Alien Rangers and when Billy went back to his normal age and such, and when he helped out the Alien Rangers, of all the times he helped out them, now it's time for Billy to help the Rangers themselves, because, it was time that Billy needed to step down from his duties of being a Power Ranger and just be a tech aide, because he's more useful this way in the season. It's sad that this is the last time we'll see David Yost, as Billy on the show, because the whole entire season of Zeo, he was very useful, helping the Rangers out when he's not a Ranger. I don't even know if I want to discuss a bit of what went on behind the scenes with David, because we know for a fact that we thought for years that David would leave, because like with Austin, Tui, and Walter, when they left, that it was all about contract disputes or wanting more money. But then turns out it was really more regarding the harassment he dealt with on set on the show for 4 years, because Zeo is Power Rangers' fourth season. So 4 years since season 1 of Mighty Morphin through this point, behind the scenes, he was dealing with that harassment about his sexuality, of him being homosexual. And then with the producers joking about that he should be the Yellow Ranger or something. No, because that's not right. Even when the Gold Ranger shows up way later down the line, probably like 30 episodes into the show, and you're going, and then they wanted Billy to be the Gold Ranger, but there were plans of that, because that would explain when we get to that plot in Zeo, when we get to like 30 episodes into the show, that, you know, Billy should have been the Gold Ranger, because, you know, the red herrings for it. You know, the people that they were teasing that would be the Gold Ranger and that identity, and that's what I liked about the show at the time, without the use of the internet and looking up stuff on the internet, because internet wasn't even a thing yet, but it was, you know, like compared to today. It makes sense also to make Tanya the Yellow Ranger. After all, she replaced Aisha. A part of me just kind of wish Aisha should have been the Yellow Zeo Ranger still. That's still my gripe. I still like Tanya, but, you know, she's the new girl in town. So what was the point? Or actually, no, scratch that part. I mean, there was a point in that, because after all, they still didn't give her a proper send-off. Just only her child actress counterpart gave the character a send-off, but it wasn't a good one. I think the behavior Bulk and Skull are exhibiting with Goldar and Rito, they come off like douchebags and treating them like bitch boys. For the last 25 years, out of all of the morphers from the Zordon era, outside of the original morphers, the Zeonizer is my favorite morpher. It's a two-piece morpher, which I like its design with the color balance of black, silver, and gold. And then you have the gem of the Zeo Crystal on the other wristband piece of the morpher, which is unique. But they actually use the toy version, since they could, you know, well, of course, it's always obvious for Power Rangers to, like, you know, if you don't have the actual Sentai prop of the morphers, you can always go to the toy store, like Toys R Us, and get the toy versions of the morphers, because the toy versions are so accurate. Quote Linkara. You know, this is the first time we get our first annual suit change. While the girls get to stay the same colors, while Tanya, this is her first time being a Ranger, given her inexperience right now. But as for the Ranger guys, Tommy, Rocky, and Adam get new colors. Rocky is blue, Adam is green, and Tommy being red. And I've been saying this for years, that ever since when Tommy became the Red Ranger, that's when I really got into the Red Ranger thing. When it was the Mighty Morphin days, I was really more about the blue and black Rangers, and even when Tommy was the White Ranger. I didn't get much into Tommy as the Green Ranger until all these years later. And even when Kimberly was the Pink Ranger. Catherine took some time for me to accept her as Pink Ranger by this season. But, you know, this in Turbo was when I liked her as the Pink Ranger. I like the fact that they did decide to display the Mighty Morphin suits in those tubes. Because it just honors the past of what they were as Rangers, though Tanya was never Mighty Morphin Yellow. For the last 25 years, I've always freaking loved the Zeo Ranger suits. They are great in different, compared to the Mighty Morphin suits in a really great way. I really love the gold trims and stuff around the suits. I like the color balance. I like not much white on the costumes. And what really always made me so nostalgic about the suits outside of the costumes are the helmets. The helmets are so simple. It's just all this color and their black respective visors with white bylines around the visors. They just are one of my favorite Ranger suit designs. They do have the technological gadget graphics on the chest, but the suits bring, well, in terms of the subtext of these Ranger suits and Power Rangers, and brings a lot of the majesty and strength to the team, and bringing the Ranger team at their strongest compared to the Mighty Morphin suits. Well, I still love the Mighty Morphin suit designs, but the Zeo suits are a great advancement to those suits. You know, given that they don't have animals as a leitmotif on the helmets this time. We won't go back to having animal leitmotif for our outfit and helmet design until Lost Galaxy, which is 4 seasons from now. I like that for our first fight with the Rangers versus the Cogs, this was all American footage because O-Ranger had a totally different ordeal with the introduction of the team. Because in the first episode of O-Ranger, it was the Red Ranger being introduced. And then the second episode of O-Ranger introduced the other 4 Rangers getting the power. And also another fun fact about the Japanese word of Chiriki. Chiriki means superpower, which makes sense. I'm so glad that the Cogs have finally made their way into the Lightning collection, but as a Hasbro Pulse exclusive. You got your metallic silver Cogs, and then you got your brown burgundy colored Cogs. This wasn't an impressive introduction to the Rangers and getting these powers, and not only that, this was a risky thing for Saban to do at the time, because knowing that once Power Rangers would start switching out from Mighty Morphin to this was a real, transitioning to Zeo was a risky marketing move, because we've been doing Mighty Morphin for a really long time, and I thought Zeo was a great change of pace. Changing the villains and the suits and stuff. You still got some of the same characters from before, but they get new powers. With Tanya being a newcomer, Billy being the tech aide this time, Bulk and Skull are still their same bumbling selves, but they are actually the true heroes of the show. But despite how they're being a bunch of jerks to Rito and Goldar when they have them as their bitch boy servants. We still have the the Ernie's Juice Bar outdoor set from last season, which is still a mainstay up until they changed a bit of it by Turbo, because knowing that, Ernie was not going to be around in Turbo, but he had a cameo in the Turbo movie, though. But it sucks that this is going to be the last time we're going to see this set of the backdoor lot of the Juice Bar. Yeah, and Ninjor, this is the last time, this was their last time they're going to mention him in the show for good, because, Ninjor, this is the last time we'll ever hear of him in the show. It was time we needed to move on. I think Zeo Beginning was a great way to kick off the Power Rangers, the status quo from being what they were. But we still have the same old quirks and, stuff and characters we had before. And especially what I like about Zeo is that how each Ranger has an individual storyline compared to, let's say, compared to a Mighty Morphin. So it's not that much common right there. So therefore, I still, 25 years later, still enjoy this opening of the season, and especially Zeo itself.